The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, 8 days of anguish, ransom, and an unrelenting search. This story has commanded undivided attention from the very first moment a whisper of something wrong began to circulate. Every official briefing issued by the Pima County Sheriff's Office has been followed closely. Every heartbreaking word posted by the Guthrie family across their social media accounts has been absorbed and recorded. Every fragment of information confirmed by major national outlets, including CNN, NBC, ABC, BBC, Fox News, and the Associated Press, as well as trusted local Tucson voices such as KGUN, Cold, and Fox 10, has been carefully pieced together into this account. It is now late Sunday evening on February 8th, 2026, in Tucson time, and what began as a frightening disappearance has stretched into its 8th agonizing day with no end yet in sight. The single most chilling and undeniable truth at the center of this nightmare, the one verified fact that refuses to allow anyone close to the story a moment of peace, is this. Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old grandmother possessed of a razor-sharp mind but a profoundly fragile heart, has been absent without explanation since the early hours following January 31st, 2026. She has been without the life-sustaining daily medications her body depends on to function. There is no confirmed evidence that she is still drawing breath. No word of any kind has come directly from whoever removed her from her home. And with each passing hour, her physical condition is being pushed closer to a dangerous threshold that her body may not have the strength to survive. Nancy Guthrie is not simply a name in a headline. She is the unshakable foundation around which an entire loving family has been built. After enduring the devastating loss of her husband far too early, taken suddenly by a heart attack, she did not crumble. Instead, she single-handedly raised 3 remarkable children. Savannah, the composed and trusted voice that millions of Americans wake up to each morning as co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. Annie, her devoted daughter who has remained close to home. And Cameron, her son, who has built a warm and faith-centered life in Tucson. Friends, neighbors, and members of her church congregation all describe the same woman without hesitation. She was a person overflowing with joy, always quick to offer a laugh, fiercely determined to live on her own terms. She was the kind of mother and grandmother who wrapped her grandchildren in stories, in long hugs, and in a love that refused to waver no matter how hard life pushed back. Even when life delivered its cruelest blows, she reached for the light. She chose hope every single morning, and she lived out that choice in the peaceful single-story ranch-style home she called her own, tucked quietly into the Catalina foothills north of Tucson, where desert panoramas stretch endlessly. Towering saguaro cacti stand like ancient sentinels along the ridgelines, and properties sit far enough apart that the nights feel private, still, and safe. But safety can shatter in the span of a heartbeat. Nancy's physical limitations were real and significant. She relied on a walker to move from room to room, rendering any notion of a spontaneous, unassisted departure completely implausible. Long walks were beyond her. Sudden movements were out of the question. Her mind, however, was an altogether different story. It was sharp, alert, and fully present, completely free from any confusion or cognitive decline. She actively managed a constellation of serious chronic medical conditions, including heart problems serious enough to require a pacemaker, along with persistent chronic pain that demanded carefully prescribed daily medication simply to keep her body stable and functioning. Physicians familiar with cases like hers have been unequivocal. Skip those medications for even a single day or two, and the decline can begin with terrifying speed. Weakness sets in, confusion can follow, cardiac events become increasingly possible, and outcomes can turn fatal with almost no warning. That ticking medical clock has cast a shadow over every aspect of this investigation since the moment her absence was discovered. The timeline walked through slowly, because every minute carries weight. Saturday, January 31st, 2026. The evening began as any other ordinary Saturday. The family gathered for dinner, exchanged warmth and laughter, and settled into the comfortable rhythms of a routine they had shared countless times before. Somewhere around 9:30 in the evening, perhaps closer to 9:45, family members drove Nancy back to her home and saw her safely inside. She made her way in using her walker. The garage door rolled down and closed at approximately 9:50 p.m. according to subsequent sheriff's briefings. Nothing about those moments appeared unusual or alarming in any way. It was simply a quiet Saturday evening drawing to its ordinary close. Then came the silence. Her phone recorded no outgoing calls or text messages following the drop-off. Her pacemaker, whose signal is transmitted in real time through an application connected to her phone, continued broadcasting normally for several hours afterward. But then in the dead of night, somewhere in the narrow window between roughly 1:45 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. on Sunday, February 1st, something critical and irreversible happened. The monitoring application lost its connection to her pacemaker entirely. The signal simply stopped. No more pings. No more data. That confined overnight window from approximately 10 p.m. Saturday through 2:30 a.m. Sunday has since become the beating heart of the entire investigation. Sunday, February 1st, 2026. The first alarm bells began ringing that morning. Nancy did not appear for her regular Sunday church service, an attendance record so unbroken that her absence instantly registered as deeply wrong to everyone who knew her. A concerned member of her congregation reached out to the family. Phones rang without answer. By around noon, relatives drove to the house, stepped through the door, and found an eerie, unsettling emptiness. There was no Nancy. There were no signs that she had left of her own free will. They called 911 without hesitation. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived swiftly. What they encountered inside the residence transformed this from a routine welfare check into something profoundly and unmistakably sinister. The home was officially declared a crime scene within hours. Signs of forced entry, including visible damage to a door or window frame, were documented. A small but unmistakable quantity of blood was present, drops found inside the house, and according to certain reports, a partial trail leading in the direction of the porch and driveway. Sheriff Chris Nano spoke to the press without ambiguity in those initial public statements. The department's firm belief was that Nancy had been taken from her home against her will. Homicide detectives were brought in almost immediately. A decision that departs sharply from standard protocol for a missing elderly person and communicated, without a single additional word, the gravity of what investigators believed they were looking at. The FBI joined the effort by Sunday evening, as is standard practice when an abduction is suspected, particularly in a case carrying the national profile that comes with any connection to Savannah Guthrie. Monday, February 2nd. Day 2. The search exploded in scale overnight. Ground teams spread out across the demanding terrain of the Catalina foothills, navigating rocky washes, arroyos, and cactus-studded hillsides. Helicopters and drones swept patterns overhead in overlapping grids. Volunteers arrived in numbers and poured into the effort with urgency. Neighboring homes were canvassed door to door. Every available doorbell camera, traffic camera, and license plate reader in the area was identified, pulled, and reviewed. The landscape offered little cooperation. The neighborhood is secluded, characterized by large lots, deeply dark skies, and very few eyes on the streets after midnight, which made tracing any initial vehicle entry or exit extraordinarily difficult. No obvious vehicle was captured speeding away. No clear trail of footprints disappeared into the desert brush. And yet the evidence found inside the house was undeniable in its conclusion. She had not wandered off. She had been taken. The medical urgency arrived like a physical blow. Without her heart medication and pain management drugs, both left behind untouched when she was removed, physicians familiar with comparable cases warned that serious physical decline could begin within as little as 24 to 48 hours. By day 2, the family understood with absolute clarity that time was not a passive companion in this search. Time was the enemy. Sheriff Nanos continued briefing the press with a tone that was measured but unmistakably firm. Nancy had not left on her own. Hundreds of tips were already flooding in. Most were noise, he acknowledged honestly, but every single one would be pursued because any one of them could be the break that changed everything. Tuesday, February 3rd. Day 3. The case veered into darker and far more twisted territory. Multiple media organizations, including TMZ as well as local outlets such as Cold and Cajun, reported receiving emails or messages purporting to originate from whoever was holding Nancy. The communications demanded millions of dollars in Bitcoin, provided specific wallet addresses, attached deadlines, and included explicit threats in the event payment was not made. Most disturbingly, some of the notes contained details that seemed too precise and too specific to have come from anyone simply reading the headlines. They referenced what Nancy was wearing on the night she was taken. They described interior specifics of her home. They referenced points of damage that had never been publicly disclosed. Authorities confirmed they were treating these communications with complete seriousness. Copies were forwarded directly to the FBI. One was even shown to Savannah for her personal review. No public declaration had yet been made regarding whether any of the messages were genuine or whether they represented cruel opportunism from individuals exploiting the story's momentum. But the Bitcoin angle was immediately recognized as fitting a contemporary kidnapper's operational playbook. Difficult to trace, swift to move, and deliberately designed to outpace traditional financial tracking. No ransom demand had reached the family directly at this stage. From whoever held Nancy, there was only silence. Wednesday, February 4th. Day 4. Activity intensified once again at the house. Additional forensic teams moved through the scene. K-9 units swept fresh trails. The family could no longer endure silence. Savannah, Annie, and Cameron posted a raw, unfiltered 4-minute video to Instagram that broke hearts across the nation. They sat close together, their faces hollowed by exhaustion, but their voices steady in the way that only grief carried with dignity can produce. They expressed profound gratitude for the prayers, the shares, and the searches. They described their mother with the kind of specificity that only her own children could offer. Kind, loyal, funny, suffused with what they called God's light. They addressed the ransom reports directly. "We've heard the reports about a ransom letter in the media," Savannah said. Then the plea shifted, aimed squarely at whoever might be holding her. "We need to know without a doubt that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you. We are ready to listen. Please reach out to us." To Nancy herself, Savannah turned her eyes to the lens and spoke as a daughter, not a broadcaster. "Mama, if you're hearing this, you are a strong woman, a precious daughter of God. We love you. Stay strong." Annie and Cameron echoed those final 3 words almost in unison. The video ended without music, without graphics, without any polish at all. Just silence. Within 20 minutes, it had 500,000 views. By morning, it had surpassed 10 million. Clips played on every major network. Vigils formed that night outside Tucson churches Nancy had attended. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder holding signs bearing 3 words. "Bring Nancy home." Thursday, February 5th, day 5. Investigators returned to the home for further processing. Sheriff Nanos held a press conference and shared a tightened, more precise timeline. The garage door had closed at 9:50 p.m. The doorbell camera, or cameras, had gone dark between 1:42 and 1:45 a.m. The pacemaker monitoring app had lost its signal between 2:12 and 2:30 a.m. The blood found on the porch had been confirmed through DNA testing as Nancy's. No suspect was named. No person of interest was publicly identified, but the sheriff repeated with clarity, "We still believe Nancy is out there. We want her home." The FBI formally announced a $50,000 reward for any information leading to Nancy's recovery or to the arrest of whoever bore responsibility. Tip lines surged again in response to the family's plea. The community had organized itself into something resembling a unified grieving village, signs in front yards, candles burning in windows, strangers sharing posts at all hours. Friday, February 6th. Day 6. Activity escalated further. Deputies and agents returned to the house for additional follow-up work. A number of reports surfaced suggesting that certain early investigative decisions might have been handled differently in retrospect, including the timeline for releasing the crime scene and for bringing in certain outside resources. Sheriff Nanos pushed back on the framing, emphasizing that the scene had been thoroughly processed from the beginning. A new message emerged that morning. Cold received another communication through their tip line. Unlike some of the earlier notes, this one contained no fresh financial demands, but it was forwarded without delay to the FBI and to the sheriff's office, who confirmed they were evaluating its authenticity. Still, no proof of life was included. Still, no direct contact had been made to the family. Saturday, February 7th. Day 7. The second family video changed everything. Savannah, Annie, and Cameron appeared on camera once more, and this time the exhaustion had etched itself permanently into their faces. The lighting was dimmer. The words were fewer. Savannah spoke carefully and deliberately. "We received your message and we understand." She paused. Then, "We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." Annie's voice was quiet but firm. "Please don't wait." Cameron added only what remained to be said, "We just want our mom." Those 4 words from Savannah, "We will pay," spread instantaneously. CNN ran a breaking news banner. NBC interrupted regular programming. Every platform flooded with the clip. Law enforcement confirmed awareness of the latest communications. No arrests had been made. No breakthrough had been announced. But the family's public declaration of willingness to meet a financial demand had irrevocably altered the dynamic of the negotiation. Sunday, February 8th. Day 8. The search continued without pause or interruption. Deputies were back at the house. Canine teams ran fresh trails. Drones scanned the terrain. Volunteers kept arriving. KGUN9 reported that authorities had received yet another message overnight. This one the most specific and demanding of all, $6 million in Bitcoin, with a wallet address to be transmitted directly to a family member at noon on Monday and a hard deadline of 5 p.m. Monday Mountain Standard Time, accompanied by explicit threats against Nancy's life if the deadline passed without compliance. Authorities treated the communication with full seriousness while simultaneously cautioning the public against speculation. President Trump had already directed federal resources toward the case. The FBI's $50,000 reward remained standing. Tips kept arriving by the hundreds. The crushing unknowns had not diminished. Whether the notes were genuine or the work of opportunistic copycats, whether the $6 million figure was the real and final demand, what the motive actually was, whether Nancy had received any care at all or was suffering without her medications, whether she remained somewhere in the foothills or had been moved far away, and most painfully of all, how much longer her body could endure without those untouched pill bottles on her bathroom counter. Part 2, the ransom messages and the psychological war being waged. This is not an hour for speculation. It is a long and grinding wait while investigators pursue every available thread. But to understand where this case stands, it is essential to examine in detail the single most explosive and controversial thread that has dominated headlines since February 3rd, the ransom communications themselves. What follows is a careful dissection of every known message that has reached the public record, the manner in which law enforcement has responded to each one, the psychological warfare embedded in the language and timing of those notes, the moment the Guthrie children publicly crossed the line from silence into a declared willingness to pay, and why, even now on day 8, investigators will not publicly confirm whether any of these communications originated from the actual person or persons holding Nancy Guthrie. The story pivoted from abduction to potential hostage negotiation on Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. 3 days had elapsed since the 911 call, and search teams were still methodically combing washes and drones were mapping every arroyo within a 10-mile radius, when several major media outlets simultaneously went quiet on their regular programming and began publishing nearly identical screenshots.
TMZ broke first, the images blurred but unmistakable, an email header, a Bitcoin wallet address, and a demand that opened at $3 million with an explicit threat of escalation if the demand was not met within 90 minutes. Cold, the Tucson CBS affiliate, and KGUN9, the ABC affiliate, both confirmed they had received similar messages within the same 2-hour window. The language in those earliest communications was almost clinical in its detachment. We have Nancy Guthrie. She is alive as of this message. She needs her medication. Send 3 million United States dollars in Bitcoin to the address below by Wednesday, 11:59 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, or she will not receive any further care. Then came the detail that made every detective's spine tighten. She was wearing the light blue cardigan with pearl buttons and gray slacks when we took her. The walker is still in the hallway by the master bedroom door. That information had never been released to the public. Not in a single press conference. Not in any family statement. Not through any confirmed leak. The only individuals who possessed that knowledge beyond Nancy herself were the family members who had dropped her off and the deputies who had processed the scene. And whoever had walked into that house after 9:50 p.m. on the night of January 31st. Sheriff Chris Nanos called an emergency briefing late that Tuesday afternoon. His tone was measured, but the weight of accumulated exhaustion was impossible to conceal. We are aware of communications that have been sent to media organizations, he said. The FBI's cyber and behavioral analysis units are already working on them. We have shared copies with Savannah Guthrie so she can personally review the content. At this time, we are not confirming or denying authenticity. What I will say is this: if these messages are legitimate, the person responsible now knows we are treating Nancy's life as time critical. Do not send money. Do not attempt private contact. Every action must go through law enforcement channels. That final instruction was standard protocol language, but its presence communicated precisely how seriously the possibility of authenticity was being weighed. Wednesday, February 4th. The viral Instagram video that became the emotional centerpiece of Day 4 contained one line that most viewers registered only peripherally, absorbed as they were in the tears and the repeated declarations of love. Delivered by Savannah almost in passing, looking directly into the camera, we've heard the reports about a ransom letter in the media. As a family, we are doing everything that we can. Those words were not accidental. Crisis negotiators and legal advisors were present in the room when that video was recorded. The family was signaling, without crossing the lines that would compromise the investigation, that they were open to dialogue and prepared to pay if it would produce proof of life and a genuine path to bringing Nancy home, Thursday and Friday, February 5th and 6th. 2 additional messages surfaced during this period. One arrived at Fox 10 Phoenix. Another reached an NBC affiliate in Los Angeles, a choice of recipient that was almost certainly not coincidental given its proximity to Savannah's professional home. The demand in these communications had escalated to $5 million. A new deadline was issued, Sunday night. The emotional temperature of the language had also shifted, cooling from clinical detachment into something closer to agitation. You think this is a game? We know you have federal resources. We know the president tweeted about it. That doesn't help her heart. Send the Bitcoin or she stops getting water tomorrow. The reference to water introduced a new and disturbing layer. It was a detail about Nancy's current physical condition that no one outside her captor should have possessed, assuming the note was genuine. The question of whether someone inside the investigation might have been leaking information, or whether an extraordinarily well-informed opportunist had stitched together enough rumors to fabricate plausibility, became increasingly pressing. The FBI publicly confirmed it was running stylometric analysis, metadata checks, IP routing traces to whatever extent VPNs and Tor networks permitted, and linguistic pattern matching against the profiles of known ransom-seeking actors.
Then on Friday morning, a third communication arrived at Cold via their anonymous tip line. It was shorter than the others, almost taunting in its brevity. Her pacemaker isn't the only thing that can go dark. The pacemaker detail had been mentioned in early press coverage, but the implication that the person sending the message was monitoring Nancy's cardiac status in real time was new and deeply frightening. When Sheriff Nanos was asked directly during a Friday evening briefing whether he was concerned that the sender had live medical access to Nancy, his response was as careful as it was revealing. "We are concerned about every aspect of her well-being. That is why we continue to ask the public for any information, no matter how small." Saturday, February 7th. The line that every parent prays they will never be forced to cross was crossed publicly that afternoon. The Guthrie siblings posted their second video. The lighting was dimmer than before. The shadows beneath their eyes had deepened into something permanent-looking. Savannah spoke first. "We received your message, and we understand." A pause. She looked down, collected herself, and looked back up. "We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." The phrase "we will pay" was delivered with a slowness and deliberateness that made it unmistakable. Both Annie and Cameron nodded visibly on camera. No dollar figure was specified. No wallet address was provided. No deadline was acknowledged. Just 4 words, carefully chosen, that communicated everything. The family had moved beyond appealing for conversation and had arrived at a public declaration of willingness to meet a financial demand in exchange for one human life. Within minutes, the clip had traveled across every platform simultaneously. CNN ran a breaking news banner. NBC interrupted its regular broadcast. Twitter and X erupted with the hashtags #BringNancyHome and #GuthrieRansom. Prayer groups, true crime forums, cryptocurrency traders, and professional hostage negotiation experts all weighed in with their own interpretations. Some called it courageous and necessary. Others called it reckless and potentially dangerous. A handful speculated that the entire sequence had been scripted by the FBI as a mechanism to draw the real kidnapper out of concealment. The smallest and cruelest corner of the internet, predictably, consisted of cryptocurrency traders speculating about wallet addresses that had never been released to the public. Sunday, February 8th. KGUN9 reported receiving yet another message overnight, this one the most detailed and direct of all the communications that had surfaced publicly. $6 million in Bitcoin. A wallet address to be transmitted directly to a family member at noon Monday. A deadline of 5 p.m. Monday Mountain Standard Time. A threat that any further delay would result in Nancy receiving no food, no water, and no medication. You have been warned. The station forwarded the communication immediately to the Joint Task Force, which by this point comprised the Pima County Sheriff's Office, the FBI's Tucson Field Office, and the Phoenix Division Cyber Unit. By mid-afternoon, the Sheriff's Office issued a statement confirming awareness of the note, reiterating that the FBI was leading all ransom-related communications, and reporting that no family member had yet received a direct wallet address or any specific payment instruction. The caution against private cryptocurrency transactions or independent negotiation was repeated firmly. Part 3. The Machinery of Hope. The search operation in full. The Catalina foothills are beautiful in photographs and on postcards. As the terrain of a missing person search, they are punishing and unforgiving. The landscape rises quickly from suburban edges into steep, rocky slopes that are cut through by dozens of dry washes, arroyos that twist and fork and disappear into deeper canyons with no warning. Saguaro cacti stand like silent overseers across the hillsides. Palo Verde trees drop thin, grasping branches that snag clothing and equipment. Chala and barrel cactus position themselves at chin height, waiting to punish any contact. The ground itself is a constant negotiation between loose gravel, exposed bedrock, and sudden drop-offs. At night, temperatures can plunge 30 degrees from daytime highs. Scars left by past monsoon floods create natural hiding places. Shallow caves, rock overhangs, dense pockets of mesquite and creosote where the darkness becomes almost total. Line of sight breaks every few dozen yards. Sound travels strangely in that landscape, voices echoing off stone faces and then vanishing into the middle distance. Cell coverage is unreliable at best. That is the environment that hundreds of people have been walking, crawling, climbing, and flying over since the afternoon of February 1st, 2026. Sheriff Nanos described it plainly in one of his early briefings. This is not flat farmland or open desert. This is rugged, vertical, complicated country. Every grid takes longer than people expect. And yet, day after day, they keep returning to it. Sunday, February 1st. Day 1. The moment the residence was declared a crime scene, deputies launched an immediate perimeter search covering the yard, the driveway, and neighboring properties within a quarter mile. Nothing was found. By late afternoon, the search radius expanded. Local volunteer fire departments and search and rescue teams joined the effort. They walked roads, checked cul-de-sacs, looked beneath every parked vehicle within reach. Still nothing. Monday, February 2nd. Day 2. The operation scaled dramatically overnight. Pima County activated its full missing persons protocol combined with all available abduction resources. The Arizona Department of Public Safety contributed helicopters equipped with FLIR, forward-looking infrared thermal imaging. 2 Black Hawk helicopters from the Arizona National Guard flew overlapping patterns between 500 and 1,000 feet above the ground, scanning for any heat signature that deviated from the surrounding terrain. Tuesday, February 3rd, Day 3. On the same day the first ransom notes appeared in newsrooms, searchers added cadaver dogs to the operation. The decision carried no implication that investigators believed Nancy was deceased. The sheriff stated the opposite consistently and publicly. But cadaver-trained canines can detect the faintest traces of human scent even days after the fact, particularly in cases where a person may have been carried or transported by vehicle for part of a journey, leaving only fragmentary ground-level trails. 2 bloodhounds and 1 trailing dog worked separate assigned zones while air support continued overhead. Wednesday, February 4th. Day 4. The family's viral video plea triggered a surge of public response that the sheriff's office had not fully anticipated. Volunteers arrived at staging areas in numbers that stretched organizational capacity. They were sorted into teams equipped with maps, water, and high-visibility vests and given unambiguous instructions. Remain on assigned paths, report any irregularity immediately, and do not disturb anything that might constitute potential evidence. This was also the day Border Patrol's BORSTAR unit, the Border Search, Trauma, and Rescue Team, deployed its personnel, agents accustomed to extended duration missions in demanding desert terrain. They brought additional K-9 teams trained in both trailing and area search. Drones, supplied by both the sheriff's office and the FBI, began flying tighter, lower-altitude grids equipped with high-resolution cameras and LiDAR for 3-dimensional terrain mapping of depressions, overhangs, and hidden cavities invisible from above at standard altitude. Thursday, February 5th. Day 5. Heavy activity returned to the house itself. Forensic teams reprocessed areas that had been cleared in the initial sweep, operating from a straightforward investigative logic. New questions generated by the ransom communications demanded a fresh look at old evidence. Had the person or persons responsible been inside the residence longer than the initial timeline suggested? Had anything been deliberately staged? Had trace materials been left behind that only became relevant once investigators knew what specific characteristics to look for? Meanwhile, ground teams extended their reach, with some search sectors now stretching 3 to 4 miles from the residence. Volunteers reported finding abandoned campsites, discarded clothing, and even a small number of old vehicles partially buried in washed sediment. Every discovery was checked and verified. Every discovery turned out to be unrelated. Friday, February 6th. Day 6. A quiet but significant operational shift occurred. The sheriff's office quietly acknowledged that certain early investigative decisions might, with the benefit of hindsight, have been approached differently, including the timeline for releasing the crime scene and the speed with which certain outside federal assets had been integrated. Sheriff Nanos was careful to clarify that nothing had been lost in the initial processing. The scene had been documented, photographed, DNA swabbed, and fingerprinted. But the acknowledgement was itself meaningful. That same day, search teams began regridding certain sectors closest to the residence, areas first walked on days 2 and 3, because scent trails can either strengthen or degrade depending on wind patterns, temperature shifts, and moisture levels. Nothing new surfaced in the rechecks, but the professional discipline the decision represented was noted by those following the investigation closely. Saturday, February 7th. Day 7, the day of the second family video. Search intensity spiked again. A staging area near the intersection of Skyline and Alvernon had grown into what one observer described as a small tent city, complete with water distribution stations, first aid tents, and charging stations for phones and radios. Deputies and FBI agents briefed volunteer teams in person before deployment. K-9 units ran fresh trails beginning from the driveway itself, attempting to recover any lingering scent that might have been masked in earlier sweeps by vehicle exhaust or the accumulated foot traffic of a week's worth of investigation activity. Drones flew nighttime missions using infrared sensors, relying on the temperature differential between a living human body and the cooling desert surface, a differential that can remain detectable even after a week under the right conditions. Sunday, February 8th. Day 8. Activity continued without a break. Mid-afternoon reports placed deputies and federal agents back inside the house once more. Neighbors observed a steady flow of marked vehicles and unmarked SUVs arriving and departing throughout the day.
Ground teams were now working extended range sectors reaching up to 6 miles in certain directions, because investigators had not eliminated the possibility that Nancy was moved by vehicle shortly after the abduction and then either released or relocated under cover of the surrounding terrain. Canines remained deployed. Thermal-equipped aircraft flew again at dusk, scanning for any anomaly the cooling desert might betray. The technology driving the search. This is not 1995. The tools being deployed in this investigation reflect the full capabilities of 2026. Multiple drone models are in the air simultaneously. Fixed-wing platforms for wide-area coverage and multi-rotor units for tight, precise maneuvering through terrain that resists straight lines. These aircraft carry 4K cameras, thermal imaging systems, and LiDAR equipment for three-dimensional terrain mapping. Some have been programmed to fly fully autonomous grid patterns through the overnight hours, uploading their footage to servers where artificial intelligence-assisted software reviews it for anomalies, without requiring a human to watch hours of featureless desert. Thermal and infrared FLIR systems mounted on helicopters and drones can detect body heat signatures from hundreds of feet in the air. Even if Nancy is sheltered beneath brush, a rock overhang, or the roof of an abandoned structure, the contrast her body temperature creates against the ambient temperature of the desert remains visible to these systems unless she is held in a space so well insulated that the thermal differential is entirely suppressed. The FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, known internally as CAST, has been working tower dumps since the earliest days of the investigation, attempting to identify any devices that activated unusually, lingered in the area for an atypical duration, or departed abruptly during the critical overnight window. License plate reader data from major corridors, including Oracle Road, Skyline Drive, and Swan Road, has been pulled and analyzed. With appropriate court orders, investigators can also request location history from mobile applications, fitness tracking devices, and vehicle telematics systems belonging to anyone identified as having been near the residence during the relevant hours. Every layer of digital evidence is being stacked against every other. The human element, volunteers, neighbors, and the refusal to stop. Sheriff Nanos has said in almost every briefing that the majority of tips are noise, but that every single one is pursued anyway, because any one of them could be the piece that opens everything. That piece has not yet arrived. But the volume has been staggering. Following the second family video, the tip line was reportedly receiving over 400 calls within a single 24-hour period. Most represent well-meaning, but ultimately unconnected sightings of elderly women at stores, parks, and highway rest areas. A smaller number carry more specificity. A white van reported idling near the foothills on the night of January 31st. A man observed asking unusual questions at a nearby gas station. An unfamiliar odor reported from a neighboring property. Each one is logged, assessed, prioritized, and followed. Neighbors have converted their own homes into informal observation posts, some installing temporary cameras pointed toward the street. Others have organized evening walking groups to cover blocks they believe may not have received sufficient attention from official search teams. Church members from Nancy's congregation have maintained daily prayer circles, after which they head out on foot with flashlights. A retired couple living 3 streets away told a local reporter, "We didn't know Nancy well, but we know what it's like to be scared for someone you love. We walk every evening now with flashlights on our dog just in case." What the statistics still allow us to believe. The numbers, while sobering, do not counsel despair. Most missing person cases that resolve successfully do so within the first 72 hours. Cases that extend beyond that window, particularly abductions of vulnerable adults, conducted with this level of sustained investigative and public resource, frequently break during the period between day 5 and day 14. The logic behind that pattern is consistent across documented cases. Pressure accumulates, financial strain begins to bite. The physical demands of managing a medically fragile captive become overwhelming, and accomplices or peripheral witnesses begin to crack under the weight of what they know. The longer an operation at this level of intensity continues, the higher the statistical probability that exhaustion, fear, or an ordinary human mistake forces an opening. In cases involving elderly victims with serious medical needs, recovery rates remain surprisingly high when public attention and investigative resources are maintained. A 2024 analysis of NAMIS data updated through 2025 found that for missing adults over the age of 80 with documented health conditions, approximately 78% of those recovered alive were found between day 4 and day 21, frequently because sustained searching and broad public visibility created opportunities that the initial 72-hour window had not. Deputies, agents, and volunteers working this case are human beings. They have seen the photographs of the walkers still standing in the hallway. They have heard the family videos played back in briefing rooms. They know the medication bottles remain lined up on the bathroom counter exactly where Nancy left them. Every day without a breakthrough weighs heavier than the last. And yet every day they come back. As one volunteer, a former paramedic, who asked to remain anonymous, told a Tucson reporter, "I keep thinking, if that was my mom, I'd want every single person out here. So I stay." Part 4.
3 children, and the weight of the world's eyes. It is Sunday, February 8th, 2026, approaching 10 o'clock in the evening in Tucson. 8 days and counting. 8 sunrises without Nancy Guthrie. 8 nights of an empty bedroom, untouched coffee cups, and a walker still leaning against the hallway wall exactly as it was left. 8 days of a family that once moved through life with the quiet, unhurried rhythm of ordinary routine, now living under the brightest and harshest spotlight the modern world can generate. This section is not about drones or ransom notes or grid searches through the foothills. It is about the 3 grown children, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron, who woke on the morning of February, first expecting an ordinary Sunday and instead stepped into a waking nightmare that has not released them for a single second since. It is about what happens when the most private grief imaginable is forced to become the most public story of the moment. It is about faith, about exhaustion, about rage held in check with enormous effort, and about the profoundly surreal experience of begging for your mother's life while an entire nation watches.
Savannah Guthrie has spent more than 2 decades on national television. She has sat across from presidents, from grieving parents, from celebrities navigating personal crises, from ordinary people at the lowest moments of their lives. She has asked the hardest questions with calm precision. She has maintained composure in the moments when everyone around her faltered. She has guided millions of viewers through breaking news with the same reassuring, steady voice day after day and year after year. Now she is the one being watched. Now she is the one whose voice breaks on camera. Now she is the one whose every syllable is analyzed, shared, prayed over, criticized, and twisted by strangers across every platform simultaneously. And yet, in the middle of all of that, she has done something remarkable in its own quiet way. She has refused to retreat behind the anchor desk and the professional distance it provides. She has stepped forward, unvarnished, red-eyed, and without a script, and she has spoken directly to whoever took her mother. The first video, February 4th, 2026. The post went live late Wednesday evening. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. No makeup, no lighting equipment, no teleprompter, no production crew. 3 siblings sitting with their shoulders touching on what appeared to be the couch of a private residence, the background deliberately kept soft and out of focus. Someone was holding the camera, probably a trusted friend or close family member, and the slight, barely perceptible unsteadiness of the frame communicated something more honest than any professional production could have achieved. Savannah spoke first. Thank you to everyone who has prayed, who has shared, who has searched. We feel every single one of those prayers. Her professional reflexes held in the opening seconds. Then the control began to slip in the most human and recognizable of ways. Our mom is kind. She is loyal. She is funny. She has been the light of our family since the day we were born. She is 84 years old. She has a weak heart. She lives with constant pain. She needs her medication every single day, not just to feel better, but to stay alive. She paused. She looked down at her hands. She looked back up into the lens. We've seen the reports about ransom letters being sent to media. We want to be very clear. We are doing everything we can. Everything. Then the turn that would carry the clip around the world. Whoever has our mother, we need to know without any doubt that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you. We are ready to listen. Please reach out to us. Her eyes moved directly into the camera for the final appeal. Mama, if you can hear this, you are the strongest woman we know. You are a precious daughter of God. We love you. Stay strong. Annie and Cameron both echoed those last 3 words almost simultaneously. The video ended. No music, no graphic, no fade. Just silence. 20 minutes after the post went live, it had 500,000 views. By 2 hours, it was playing on every major television network. By morning, it had crossed 10 million views. A candlelight vigil formed that same night outside a Tucson church that Nancy regularly attended. Strangers gathered in the dark holding signs with 3 words. The second video, February 7th, 2026. 3 days later, the same 3 siblings were on camera, but the shift in their physical appearance carried its own language. The lighting was dimmer. Faces that had looked exhausted on day 4 now looked as though exhaustion had moved in permanently. Savannah's eyes were swollen in a way that neither rest nor makeup could have addressed. Annie's hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Cameron sat slightly forward, elbows on knees, like a man bracing for something he knows is coming. Savannah spoke with a measured, deliberate slowness. We received your message. We understand. A pause that everyone watching could feel. Then, we beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay. Annie's voice was quieter but carried no less weight. Please don't wait. She has already been without her medicine too long. Please bring her back to us. Cameron added only one sentence.
We just want our mom. The video ran 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Shorter than the first, but vastly more concentrated in its impact. Every word had been weighed. No general expressions of gratitude. No extended prayers for the public. Just a clear,